I will just say a few words of introduction. So if you just happen to end up here by kind of accident, we work at Corporate Europe Observatory, or CEO, which is a lobby watchdog that has been denouncing the influence of the lobbying of big companies over EU decision making processes for almost 30 years now. And Kenneth will be doing the webinar. And he has been a very important part of the organization since 2008. He has worked on a very wide range of issues. He has published this fantastic book called Europe of Capital, edited by the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung. And there it has English, Danish, and German versions. And today we are here to hear about his latest report called "This is what corporate capture looks like: how corporations run the EU deregulation agenda."
Yeah, thanks a lot, Joanna. Yeah, for the past 2-3 months, I've worked hard on a report. I mean, Joanna, yeah, I am the main author of the report. I should say, though, that a report like this one could never happen without a lot of help from my friends, and not least from my colleagues. So it is kind of a collective product as well. The title is "This is what corporate capture looks like: how corporations run the EU deregulation agenda," and that's exactly what it's about. From early on, when the so-called simplification campaign started, the campaign that we soon came to know as a sheer deregulation campaign, we've asked ourselves all along, what is the in how far is the agenda developed by the European Commission influenced by corporate lobby groups, by business groups, and that, in a nutshell, is what the work on the report was about. It was about determining just how much the deregulation agenda, the deregulation strategy, is influenced by all the corporate players that we see on the Brussels lobbying scene. We've tried to determine what the mechanics are, so to speak. So how does it work? How does the Commission come up with the ideas for deregulation? How do they, in particular, how did they last year when they presented 10 big deregulation laws, the so-called omnibuses? Why did they pick those omnibuses, and why did they take the exact shape that they got? And who were the players that influenced them, and how? This is my menu for today, for this afternoon, for a webinar that we expect to last about an hour. I will begin with just a few milestones on the history of the deregulation campaign. How did it come about, and how did it reach the proportions that it got? How did it become so comprehensive and ambitious and far-reaching? Second, in what way are business groups in a key position to influence the deregulation campaign? This is where I will be looking at the so-called targeted dialogues, some new consultation mechanisms that I think that in our coalitions, at our meetings, perhaps we've discussed them a little too little. Third, what have they achieved and how? That's where I look at the omnibuses, and I will try to link the different omnibuses to specific lobby groups. And now I'll say a little bit about how the Commission opened the door to the influence that they got in the end. Fourth, what's in the pipeline? What are we looking at next year? And last but not least, I'd like to wrap my talk up with a few ideas on how we move forward together, how we start campaigning on some new issues that I feel are lacking from our agenda nowadays. So first, how did they make deregulation big? Just a few historic milestones in our analysis. we need to go back to the summer of 2022 when there was a crisis in the European business community, in that they felt hard pressure from high energy prices that followed on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And that led them to get together and to shout very loudly and demand two things in particular. First was more action on the single market, and second was initiative to ease the so-called regulatory burden. It didn't take all that long for the Commission to act. In early 2023. Some initiatives were taken by the Commission to reduce the regulatory burden. End of 2023, the Council chipped in particular, the French and the German government did a strong declaration where the first part was to find ways to reduce the regulatory burden on European businesses. But the real determining moment, and that's what this slide is about, was when we had the Antwerp meeting in February 2024. A big meeting convened by industry, mainly by energy-intensive industries, led by CEFIC, the Chemical Industry Association, in which they developed and signed 10 demands for the next term in European politics. And two distinguished guests. One was a representative from the Belgian government that had the council presidency at the time, and Ursula von der Leyen, not least. Here we have a small image of Ursula von der Leyen receiving the 10 demands. And of the 10 demands, one was key. The first one was about having the Commission develop an omnibus proposal to take corrective measures on all relevant existing EU regulations as the first piece of legislation to be presented in the next EU institutional cycle. So the first time in recent years where we see the term omnibus proposal. Omnibus is a method of doing legislation that is well known in the European Union, but from way back. So this was a return after a long time in hibernation. What industry imagined here was that the Commission would be able to do one big law proposal that would change all relevant existing EU regulations in one blow. They didn't get that, but they did get a lot of other omnibus proposals, as many will know. Then shortly later that year, we had the Draghi report that came out, which in the main served as a report that gave momentum to the pressure campaign to have this become a very, very ambitious simplification campaign, an ambitious deregulation campaign that was to involve all commissioners. We've had several deregulation campaigns in the past that was in the main reduced to a few commissioners. This time around, or so said Mario Draghi in September 2024, this time around, we needed to have all commissioners involved. And that indeed did materialize. So what we got was a deregulation campaign that was centered around two things. First, omnibus proposals, through which the European Commission would change several laws in one go. We had 10 last year. I will return to them. So not one big omnibus, but a series of omnibuses. And we had a commitment to have this be a project that would span all EU laws. In principle, that was an early decision of the new European Commission. In principle, all European laws would have to undergo some sort of scrutiny to figure out whether they could be made more simple, whether they could be changed so that they would impose a lesser burden on businesses. With such an ambition, and I mean, it's not the first time. I can think of a few times in the past when this issue of going through the whole EU acquis was on the table as well. About a decade ago, for instance. How do you go about that? In that we're talking about a couple of 100,000 pages of EU laws, and what is important, what is less important, what should be changed, and what should not. Are we dealing with an approach that would be about intelligent people in the European Commission, hosts of civil servants that would go through the whole thing and think carefully about it, or would it be some other approach? Um, um, or would it be say through bilateral meetings between commissioners and business groups? Um, the Commission would soon present a methodology, you could say, but before we come to that, let's look at what 2024 looked like from the perspective of who the commissioners met with. In the report, you will see a lot of numbers. I've spent many days counting meetings, and when you look at who the commissioners that tabled omnibus proposals last year, when you look at who they met with, there's a very, very clear overweight of meetings with business groups. 84% of all the meetings they had, and the tendency is that the closer you get to the commissioners that really matter on the simplification agenda, the more extreme is the imbalance between meetings they have with business groups and meetings they have with other types of other representatives, other interest representatives. I've highlighted two in the report. There is Valdis Dombrovskis, who had 184 meetings in total in 2024, and 182 of them were with business groups. And the industry commissioner Seshoni had 84 meetings about simplification, all of them, with business groups. So clearly, I mean, this is honestly, this is how we know most parts of the commission. This is not, I mean, this is not very very unusual. It's dark and it's problematic, but it's not unusual, and it's not new. What is new is that the Commission has set up two types of so-called targeted dialogues that is to accompany the Commission all along throughout the unfolding of the simplification campaign. So all commissioners have been asked to hold regular so-called implementation dialogues twice a year, two every year for every commissioner. A type of dialogues that is set up to, in the main, to hear business concerns and identify opportunities for simplification and burden reduction. That's the way it is. It is phrased in a document called the Competitiveness Compass from February last year. So the implementation dialogues, and then in parallel we have the reality checks, another type of dialogues, which in many ways looks like the implementation dialogues. They are a little bit different, the two of them. Whereas the implementation dialogues are pretty transparent, everyone can go to the Commission website and look at the a list of participants and the agendas and the notes from the meetings. The reality checks are much more opaque. I've spent months trying to dig out information about the reality checks, and I've compiled what is almost a complete list of the reality checks the Commission had last year, but it's not a complete list. There are still 5 or 6 missing. And after 3 or 4 months, I've been working for 3 or 5 months to 3 to 4 months to get the last pieces of the puzzle. Follow our website, and sometime within a month or so, we'll be able to produce a full list. But the reality checks, the Commission has made that very clear. The reality checks is not supposed to be as transparent, as open as the implementation dialogues. They are supposedly a kind of a confidential space where the details of an upcoming omnibus is supposed to be developed or hammered out. In terms of participants at these two so-called targeted dialogues, the tendency is pretty clear. We have slightly more than 70% business representation in the implementation dialogues. With the reality checks, it's slightly more complicated. I've counted business participation at 79%, but perhaps more interesting is that quite a few of them had almost had no civil society participation, were completely dominated by business groups. So, I mean, this is the way many of the omnibuses came to be. It was through dialogues that were completely opaque and completely dominated by business groups. So, what have they achieved and how? I've been through all 10 omnibuses. I soon dropped one of them because I found it less interesting, but nine out of 10, I have tried to make the connection between the way that it ended up, the main proposals in the omnibus, and specific lobby groups. If we begin by perhaps the biggest political battle over deregulation that we saw last year on the due diligence file and corporate sustainability reporting, about which an omnibus that led to the severe weakening of a proposal on corporate sustainability and due diligence that was quite historic when it was adopted. In short, what was in the omnibus was the reduction in scope, in that it now concerns only the direct business partners of a given company. Liability provisions have been severely weakened, and there is very little, if any, space for more ambitious rules at the national level. This is the omnibus as it came to be was pretty much like the wish list of the employers' organization of France and Germany and Italy. There's a striking similarity between a document tabled by the European Roundtable of industrialists on this issue. And then there are a series of smaller measures that can be linked to other lobby groups. This particular omnibus was adopted after two big roundtables in early February last year, later redefined to be a kind of implementation dialogues, and it was developed through bilateral meetings between the Commission and business groups. The third omnibus on the cap was a bit different than many of the others, in that there was already a process in force to simplify life of big farmers and agribusiness that dated back to early 2023, and special advisory groups were already set up to that effect. So there we did not see implementation dialogues or reality checks play any significant role, but rather other kinds of dialogues. And we had in the driver's seat of the omnibus people who know the agriculture area. Not so surprising, the alliance of big farmers and cooperatives and agribusiness, COGESA. On the Omnibus 4, which is mainly, I mean, there's a lot going on that does not change the substance of regulation, but changes the companies that they relate to. And with Omnibus 4, a new category of companies was decided, the so-called small mid-caps with between 250 and 500 employees that are to be exempted from things that relate to F gases, to GDPR, and to financial regulation in different ways, to batteries regulation as well. This was an omnibus that was mainly developed through an implementation dialogue and bilateral meetings. And in the driver's seat, we saw a group that we are beginning to get familiar with in CEO, European family businesses, which was very important in this time around in developing the fourth omnibus. The fifth on defense, that's where we saw the defense industry have the Commission do a proposal to exempt them more from rules on hazardous chemicals. And an omnibus that would also make the use of so-called general transfer licenses more widespread, which in a nutshell means that there will be less checks and balances when it comes to arms trade and human rights. This was an omnibus tool that was developed mainly through an implementation dialogue. On chemicals, this was quite a process that this particular omnibus went through. A series of, I think, 3 different reality checks with hundreds of participants. All, if we put them all together, it was in the end mainly proposals that you can trace to CEFIC, so the Chemicals Association, and the German one in particular, and to Business Europe. This was an omnibus that even dare touch on things like carcinogenic substances. They were a very controversial proposal that came out in that omnibus was about easing the control of carcinogenic substances in the production of cosmetics. Omnibus 7 on the so-called digital omnibus. Again, implementation dialogues and reality checks. A very strong dominance of businesses. A few very striking experiences from that process. We saw, for instance, the Commission refuse access to some of the main digital rights groups that we know. EDRI, for instance, were refused access to one on artificial intelligence, whereas IKEA, the German the Swedish furniture producer, was present. So a process dominated by business and with proposal that came out, which were, I guess, this is when we learned for real that the GDPR is not sacred anymore. We've had years where it could not be touched, but now under the pressure from big tech groups that would like to see it softened on the question of artificial intelligence development in particular, it's now a very different scenario that we're facing. The 8th omnibus on environmental legislation. This was one where formally it was not developed through implementation dialogues, but a form that was pretty similar. It led to the removal of obligations for energy-intensive companies to explain their transition to climate neutrality, and it led to a proposal to drop an existing database called SCIP, I think, SCIP, which is used by many workers in the services industry when they try to figure out whether they're in risk of having to deal with hazardous chemicals. Very strong reaction against that proposal from some services union. And there we saw in the driver's seat the tech industry and some and a few and quite a few industries linked to hydrogen production and the like. Omnibus 9 on the automotive omnibus in itself, not super controversial. Perhaps but it was presented together with proposals to reduce the ambitions on well, there's the 2035 objective to stop the sale of combustion engine was modified a bit at the on that occasion. This happened mainly through bilateral meetings and high-level dialogues between the European Commission and the automotive industry. A very, very, very thin civil society representation there. I think maybe transport and environment were on the spot now and then, but heavily dominated by the auto industry. And then last but not least, there is the 10th Omnibus on food and feed, which led to the annulment, you could say, of the regular reviews of pesticides. A proposal that can be extremely damaging seen with environmental from an environmental perspective, in that these regular reviews have proved absolutely crucial in the public debate and the political struggle over the fate of pesticides. This was developed mainly through a call for evidence, so written consultation and an implementation dialogue. And the drivers of the omnibus are some of the usual suspects, CropLife Europe, and a number of associations from the agriculture area. All of them named explicitly in documents from the Commission as the ones that came up with the idea. Just a quick word on what we're facing next year. To the extent that we can tell at this point, we have a Commission work program that is very clear that we will see the simplification, the deregulation agenda persist. That they will keep the same speed that they had last year at least. We have the word of the Commission in the work program, but at least that more than half of the work program's legislative initiatives will focus on making EU law lighter, clearer, and easier to implement, and that they plan to set a new series of simplification initiatives and omnibus packages out for treatment by discussion by decision makers. Putting the pieces together, we have at least this list for now. There's an omnibus to simplify energy product legislation that will be out in sometime in a couple of months. There's one on taxation, another one on defense, citizens omnibus, about which I know absolutely nothing. There's one on medical devices, and there's another one on cars, another automotive omnibus. However, this can never be a complete list, in that, and that's underlined in the Commission's work program. It is, as explained, the implementation dialogues and reality checks are there to help the Commission identify opportunities for simplification, for deregulation as they develop. So more omnibuses are likely to be added to the list that we can put together from what we know so far. So what to do about the deregulation wave? I mean, we've come pretty far in our view. If you look at the whole community of civil society organizations and trade unions in and around Brussels, we're pretty well organized in the Rules to Protect coalition, and a few countries are beginning to mount campaigns that is about the EU deregulation campaign. There's one here in Austria that's very well developed. I was in Germany to see a meeting of German coalition last week, which was an amazing experience. And there are groups in in other countries as well that are beginning to look towards Brussels and help develop political actions. We have regular statements with hundreds of sign-ons, strategy meetings, and importantly, there are coalitions built up to around specific political fights on due diligence, on chemicals, on digital rights. What we may need perhaps is to have more of a focus on procedure would not be the right word, but on the corporate capture element of the deregulation campaign. I know it sounds terribly cliche, but I mean this is not the first deregulation campaign that we as CEO are involved in, but it's no doubt the worst. I mean, it's probably worse than ever for three reasons. The first is that the scale of the project. All commissioners have received orders to deliver and to work out what to do through implementation dialogues and reality checks. In earlier versions, only a few commissioners would be involved, and the framework would not be as strict and one-dimensional. There is the scope of the project. Deregulation can strike anywhere. It can be about everything. It can potentially touch on any European law. And last but not least, it's an agenda that the Commission wants to develop with business representatives in a way that we haven't seen it before. I mean, it would be a mistake to say that we haven't seen corporate capture in the past or corporate dominated deregulation agenda, but the Commission is taking a few steps this time around that takes us into new territory. And to explain what that is about, I think I will turn to the operational guidance for the reality check. So this is a document that comes from the Secretariat General of the Commission. It's a 3-4 pages document about how the different branches of the Commission, the different DGs, are supposed to set up reality checks. And about the choice of participants, they say that it should mainly be about an exchange with practitioners applying EU law. So practitioners applying EU law would not, for instance, be environmental groups trying to working for a universal ban of PFAS, to give you a random example. It would not be a digital rights group that's trying to secure our privacy in the face of reckless big tech companies. It would be companies themselves. And if there are to be other stakeholders on board, except for businesses, they are supposed to be directly involved in the application of EU law. This is probably the strongest wording I've seen in documents like this ever, in that it breaks very, very clearly with principles that the Commission, at least formally, the European Commission has adhered to principles of consultation that is impossible to square with this kind of wording. I will take you all the way back to 2002. This is when the principles of consultation were born. It was under the Prodi Commission, and and they back then two different documents were adopted. One on the use of expertise, another one on consultation. And reading them today is really pretty striking, because there's absolutely no correlation between the reality of the European Commission today and the principles that they adopted back then. Just a few quotes, and there is this one that who are the relevant parties for consultation? It's not just those impacted by the policy, like companies. They speak of a wider impact of the policies on areas like environment and consumer rights. And among legitimate stakeholders and bodies that need to be consulted are bodies that have stated objectives, giving them a direct interest in the policy. So, I mean, that's completely different mindset and a different wording than what we see come from the Commission at the moment. It's not that in recent years we've seen the Commission act very much according to the principles for 2002, but what they do at the moment is that they seem to be on a collision course, rhetorically as well. That they're about to break new ground, in the sense that they try to make it more legitimate to have a business only approach. So on top of all the campaigning that we are doing, that is ongoing on the individual omnibuses, on the environment, on digital rules, on cars, on climate, I would really like to see us be able to campaign more coordinated on the way this deregulation campaign is working. In particular, the way that the Commission has set up a deregulation machine that is about ensuring that proposals from business groups reaches the ears of the Commission and are taken into account when the Commission makes it pick for the next omnibus. And I think if I was to throw out a quick political platform for such work, I'd say, would it not make sense to begin working more systematically to defend and promote the consultation principles from 2002? And second, if we were to attack something on the current list, would it not be a good idea to demand that the Commission drop the reality checks entirely? Those are loose thoughts, but and certainly just the beginning. But I mean, the point is just that there's something happening there at a deeper level that we should be very worried about, and that we should act on. So thanks a lot. There's a space for questions now. In case we don't manage to handle all of them before the end of this hour, here's my email address. If you would like to contact me bilaterally, you're very welcome.